Welcome in, everyone. You were listening to Bulls Central. It's been a while since I've had a guest on the channel, and today I'm joined with me by a great podcaster, longtime diehard Bulls fan. Him and his co-host Edward have one of the longest-standing Bulls podcasts out there. You know him for his great work on the Bulls Gold podcast. It's my pleasure to welcome to the show Salim Suterwalla of the Bulls Gold podcast. Salim, thanks for coming on, my man. I appreciate you making the time.
Jamal, really appreciate you having me on, man. I love your work. You've been doing a great job just on both the Bulls side and the NBA side. Your channels have been doing some great content, and it's always fun to interact with you. And it was really fun meeting up with you finally. Again, thank you for asking me to come to the game with you. We went to the Magic game. That was a really fun time. Even I mean, it was rough in the beginning, and then they came back and almost won, but it just doesn't work out. But yeah, that was
that
a
was a
fun
weird
time.
game because and
Mhm.
they basically did a repeat against the Magic in the following game in the in-season tournament, right? Where it's like they started out horribly. I think they had 33 points in both first halves, and then they ended up coming back and taking the lead in the not in the game we were at, the second game they ended up taking the lead, and then they blew it obviously, and then yeah, the game we were at, they tied it at the very end. Everyone was going crazy, and then to be let down by a Paolo Banchero
Yeah,
game winner.
yeah.
But it was still fun.
Zach,
Still, it's always fun to go to a Bulls game.
yeah, for sure. And if I remember, Zach actually hit a couple of clutch shots late, right?
He did.
If I
He and
remember
he had the
correctly,
game tying
he
three. Yeah,
tied it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And then yeah, Banchero got away with a travel
yes,
against
that's right.
AC.
The last 2 minute
That was
report was incredible.
another last 2 minute report telling the Bulls that the refs stole a win from them.
Yeah, it happens.
But yeah, that happens.
I forgot to mention, if you haven't already, be sure to give Salim a follow on Twitter, Salim_BG Hoops. Again, check out the Bulls Gold podcast. I'll leave a link to all that in the description. Like I said, him and Edward, they do a great job on their show. They have a lot of great guests. Now, like we were talking about, the game that we met up, right? That was sort of the peak of the Zach LaVine drama. I think it was the day before when the news came out. Both Zach and the Bulls were open to finding him a new home. The Bulls were playing horribly at that time. Salim and myself, we were talking about, what in the world is this team going to do? They're a complete mess throughout the game. But Salim, a lot has changed since then, since that game. The Bulls have started making some strides in the right direction. Guys are playing better. They're playing better style of basketball. Although I wasn't as impressed in the most recent 2 games against the Hornets, which maybe we'll talk about. The younger guys are finally starting to show signs of growth and progression here and there. Granted, I still think changes need to be made. We'll talk about that.
Mhm.
But what has stood out to you most from the Bulls, and how they've been playing so far, at least since that 5-14 initial run?
So obviously, I feel like the last 5 games have been a little rough on the offensive side
Yeah.
overall, but like before that, without Zach and seeing like the ball movement, how quick, like so how Billy wanted them to play coming into the season,
Yeah.
where they have a lot of quick decision making when you consider the fact when you're looking at pass shoot, pass, drive type of the quick decisions, being bang, bang, bang decisions. They're doing that. They were doing that, that is. And then obviously we saw the breakout of kind of a Coby White. We saw Patrick Williams starting to really get it together. And granted, he obviously didn't have the same box score numbers as Kobe did, but I think you saw a lot better uh, activity from him. I think the shot mostly started falling for him again. But yeah, those are some of the things that really started sticking out. And obviously, I think defensively they were starting to kind of get cohesive together again as well.
Right.
Obviously, I mean, no, not trying to drown Zach here, but I think the way he was playing, both on both ends of the court, really, he was kind of playing selfishly. So kind of taking that equation out of the off the team. The defense got better. The offense, like I said, was free flowing, got better. So they were playing as a fun, cohesive unit.
I'm curious to get your thoughts, and I know it's a small sample size. Have you noticed a difference in Zach's overall play in just these, last 2 games since he's returned?
It's been uneven. I feel like so the first game I thought that was arguably his best game of the season when you consider both ends of the court.
Right.
Like
Yeah, he was really
when he
locked in
came,
defensively. Yeah.
yeah, and people, people talk about, well, how about that Pistons game against when he had 50? I really did not appreciate that game from
Yeah,
Zach, mostly because
I'm with you
he
too.
was he was just gunning.
Hmm.
He wasn't moving the ball. He wasn't like getting easier looks for his teammates. He was just on. The defense was non-existent. I mean, they lost by what? Like I can't remember. That's by double digits to the freaking Pistons.
Yeah.
So like that to me wasn't a game that I would say, damn, this is a really good signature Zach game where he is being a difference maker, he's being an all-star. He was just kind of, hey, I'm getting mine and that's all I care about right now.
Yeah.
And so in respect of that, like this game for sure, for felt to me like, yeah, that first game back, that this was like his best game when he was engaged defensively. He was putting in that effort that we've seen him make improve to the last couple of seasons. And then offensively, I think he saw a little bit more uh effort and ability in him from trying to play within the structure of the offense. I mean, there's certain things that Zach just doesn't have a feel for. You
Mm.
saw little bits of it where he's and so when he gets a ball, he does that little pump fake instead of just shooting or making a quick drive, and then he kind of gets into an isolation mode. That's just kind of a habit of his, and it's just
Right.
there's something he does. But I think we saw a little bit better decision making overall. And then the second game, I don't want to put too much into it just because he is coming back after a long layoff,
Yeah.
so it could have played a part into it. But it was kind of an uneven performance from him, in my opinion, on that second Hornets game. But yeah, that's just been my overall assessment of the two games from Zach so far.
Yeah, and for me, the first game I thought was good, like you mentioned. I think he was very engaged defensively. He contributed in offense in good ways. The second game I wasn't as impressed. And again, like you were mentioning, we kind of have to keep in mind he's been off for a while. It takes a little bit to kind of get your wind back up and get back into the flow of the game. I think the thing that had me most concerned about the last one, I talked about it in my post game video, was that there's just something about the offense that doesn't gel well. And I'm not saying that that's on Zach, right? It's like when he's out there, it's Zach's fault. It's just that the offensive flow is not as cohesive as you would like to see based on, those first 19 games or so. Like sorry, the first 19 games, what we saw that I felt was kind of a repeat of what happened last night in the game against the Hornets. That was the only thing that bothered me is because like I don't want to go back to that because that was really rough basketball to watch. And there were good things that happened in that game last night too. But it's like this is the Hornets team completely depleted. You know, they don't have their best players. LaMelo Ball, Gordon Hayward, PJ Washington was out of the lineup. That should have been a blowout. They should have been early
Mhm.
garbage time, and then they win it overtime. And I'm not putting it all on Zach because DeMar had some miscues at the end, right? And there's too much isolation
Mhm.
ball for him and almost cost the Bulls the game. But there's just the way that the offense was flowing last night had me a little bit worried, and I think that was the biggest thing. Was it's like I don't know, like what's gonna happen because we got the trade deadline, which we can talk about. It's less than a month away. No trades have been made by the Bulls so far. Anyway, we're recording this Tuesday evening. What do you want to see from this team as we approach the deadline? And do you think that there is a world where Zach could still remain on the team beyond the deadline?
As the Zach saga has gone on from the moment that trade requests happened to now, seeing how like rock bottom his trade value has gotten, I
Right,
wouldn't be surprised if he's still on the team. Because like I look at that conversation with the Lakers and it's D'Lo and Rui Hachimura, and I'm like, I do not like Rui. I can live with whatever. I do
right.
not want D'Lo on the team.
Oh, same.
Um, like he's like Zach, but like he's like the worst parts of Zach amplified.
Yeah,
So like I don't want him on the team. I don't want him taking minutes from Coby. I don't want him taking minutes from Io. All that stuff. I don't want that on this roster. And then, like I said, you don't really get a lot of future assets. I don't even know if that pick would be involved, that 2029 pick.
right.
And again, it's a Lakers, so the 2029 pick, getting from a Lakers team that is kind of famous for quick rebuilds, this being able to snag any superstar that they want, it's like that might as well could be like a late first round pick for,
Right.
for essentially an all-star caliber player. So I think with the way his value's gone, I could see him still being on the roster after the trade deadline. It would be disappointing in that sense, but it's kind of been like a situation where the Bulls and the Zach have done this to themselves. Like, AK started this like a year ago, until during the last trade deadline where he
Mm,
was shopping him this offseason. He was shopping him. He probably had an opportunity to offload Zach and get something of a return for him, but he kept saying, "No, I want to wait, wait, wait," and then
right.
all the bad blood came about, and it kind of just tanked his value. Um, and then as far as like what I would like to see, like yeah, I would like to see like AC traded, get capitalize on that, uh, that the value that you have, and you can probably get a couple of first rounders for him. DeMar, I would see like if you can get value for him, I would do it, but I wouldn't just dump DeMar for any random like role players, just because he does bring value as a ball handler, taking that pressure off of Coby and Pat and giving them a mentor in a sense.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to maybe keep him around. And obviously, Vooch, I don't think he's going anywhere just because that contract is a tough sell for a lot of teams. But like, yeah, just kind of a reset to kind of get some future assets. You have a couple of young players. You go into the offseason, maybe you get a better pick, add another good young guy to this roster, reassess, and maybe even 2025 you can not necessarily tank. I don't like to use the word tank because I'm not for that, Pistons type of tanking that they're doing, or like, some of the teams that have done in the past, like, the famous process Sixers.
Right.
I'm not for that kind of stuff. But don't get me wrong. At the same time, I would love to get Cooper Flag, who's supposed to be the number one pick in 2025.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be opposed to like some kind of rebuild where you're trying to add that type of caliber player. But yeah, I mean, I look at this team and I'm at a point where it's like I just don't see the point of trying to be like a playing team. I think it's time to prioritize some future team building aspects too.
Well, do you think there is a world where they could be, even for this season, better than a play-in team? Because I mean, I look at the standings, right? It's like there's 5 game difference between, where they're at ninth versus eighth, but then fourth through eight, they're all even out right now. I mean, there's a world where they could make some meaningful progress in the standings with an easier schedule, which they have an easier schedule ahead of them. Do you think there is a world where they could actually be somewhat competitive? Granted, meaning moves would be need to be made at the trade deadline.
Yeah, it's tough. Like you look at, I feel like New York is going to play a lot better now since that OG trade. They have been playing
Yeah, they have. Yeah.
better since that OG trade. Are the Cavs going to stay where they are? I feel like they're too talented to just kind of hover around where they've been. I feel like the Pacers are probably going to make a move. They'll get better. But I mean, they're a really good team as is. They're going to continue to be competitive. I think Magic, you'll see them fall a little bit, but I don't know how much further they fall. So it's hard for me to see the Bulls really catch like beyond being staying in that play-in area. Like they
Yeah.
would almost have to start winning at like a 60 win pace. And that's tough. And then granted, the Bulls do have I think they have like the second to like easiest like strength of schedule
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
remaining of the season.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard for me to see them being able to like pass and get into like the top six where you avoid that play-in situation.
That's something I always have to like remind people of sometimes, right? Because it's like, yeah, it looks like, oh, they're only 5 games back, but you also have to remember the other teams need to start losing in addition to the Bulls
Right,
winning, right? To actually make that
right,
type of
right.
jump. It's a big ask. And again, it's that hole that really, the Bulls started off the season that they're really gonna have a hard time, digging themselves out of. Um, I did want to talk, about Zach LaVine a little bit more. Obviously, the guy that's been in trade rumors the most. Everyone's been firing up the trade machine. What can they get for Zach? Um, I guess maybe I'll ask it a different way in terms of your approach and what you would want to see at the deadline. What do you think actually happens at the deadline for the Bulls? Because I think some people are kind of skeptical of this front office and whether or not they'll actually do something. Do you think
Right.
that there is a possibility that they just kind of stand pat and do nothing like they've done the last two trade deadlines?
I mean, there's always a possibility for that. Because yeah, like you said, they not only last two deadlines, but in the sense they've generally stood pat. Like they've had what, like four opportunities to
Yeah.
really shake up this
Off-season moves
roster
too.
when
Yeah.
you consider off season, and they've done minimal, transactional moves, just kind of in the off season, just working around the margins, which I feel like they've failed on as for on those moves as well. I mean, Drummond was a good move, but Goran didn't work out that well outside for that hot month that he had in the beginning of the season.
Right.
Javon Carter, their big signing, has not really been, what we thought he would be. Torrey Craig, unfortunately, to no fault of his own, I mean, he's out right now through injury. So yeah, it's very likely that they don't do anything because that's what they're prone to do. What I would like to see them do is combine Zach and AC to a teams like the Warriors.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they really want to win, right? Teams like the Warriors, even the Kings. You look at some of these teams that are trying to get up in the standings and keep up in the wild wild west. You can try to maybe from the Warriors get like Moody, Kaminga, maybe a couple of picks, take on Chris Paul's contract maybe, or I don't
Hmm.
know, maybe Wiggins, like he has like a year left. So not only would you kind of cut salary in long term, but you get some young guys, get some picks, send them Zach and AC to help them, compete in this window that, they still have this all-time great player and staff to try to really compete and win there. Kings too. I don't know how much they would be willing to give up. I feel like you probably have less uh like players that you can get in return. Like you probably have to
Yeah.
get sell for like Hooter and like Barnes and maybe a couple of picks. But I do like that. Like I said, that Warriors package. More ideally, like if like I said, if you package Zach and AC to send over there.
I think that's the only way you're going to get a meaningful return for Zach LaVine is if you attach Alex Caruso to the deal. A team like the
Right.
Warriors you mentioned, they've expressed interest in Caruso before. Well, a lot of teams have expressed interest in Caruso. Um, I think the only thing that gives me a little bit pause, and I've talked about this before, I really don't want to trade Caruso unless it's for a significant haul. So something like you mentioned, if it's like Kaminga, Moody, you get two picks in the deal. Um, you mentioned taking on Chris Paul's contract, or maybe it's even, Klay Thompson, he's on an expiring deal.
Yeah.
Something like that, yes. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of people. It's like you got to trade Caruso because his value is at an all-time high. Yes, if you can get a significant haul, in my view, and I'm in the minority in this, and I know that. But for me, I value so much in terms of what he brings from an energy perspective.
Mhm.
The voice that he is in the locker room, the vocal presence, um, veteran leadership, all that kind of stuff. I think that's even valuable on a young rebuilding team, right? Like if the Bulls were to trade Zach, DeMar, Vucevic, I think there would still be tremendous value in having a player like Caruso on this team just for the young guys. I kind of think back to, the initial rebuild after they traded away Jimmy Butler. You had all the, Markkanen, Wendell, Coby. I mean, granted, coaching wasn't the best, but it's like you need to still have those veteran voices on the team to help guide those younger players. And Caruso is the perfect type for that, right? Because he doesn't have much of an ego. He doesn't have to have the ball in his hands. It's like yeah, that's what gives me pause about trading Caruso, even though I know it makes sense, right? It's like he's on a team friendly contract. His value is high. If you're not going to win now, you might as well try to shop him. But that's the biggest thing it gives me pause. And what would be sort of your like, what's the minimum you would be okay with trading for Caruso? Because I feel like there is a point where it's like, oh, it's not worth trading him, and you might as well just keep him.
Like a solid young player and a first round pick,
Okay.
I
Okay.
think is something I would do. Like you can get like and obviously young player is a broad term because there's young players can, develop to be of various different stages. Like if
Sure.
I could get a player that looks like he can turn into a solid starter, but isn't there yet, has the potential to be like this solid, like kind of the way AC is in a sense, being this really high caliber role player. Um, and then you get a solid first rounder. I think I would do that. Um, and I get your point too. I do. The way I kind of look at it though, it's like I feel like I like the Bulls have some solid young players, right?
Yeah.
But I don't feel like they have any blue chip guys that you can
No.
say, okay, this guy is who I'm building around, and then I have all these other pieces
Sure.
that could fit around him. So I feel like the Bulls' priority should be kind of getting that blue chip guy first. I kind of liked what the Rockets did this offseason in a sense, because I mean, and not a lot of people were like, what the hell are the Rockets doing? It made sense what they were doing.
Yeah.
They had a lot of young like players that have really good potential, like Shingun, Amin Thompson they just drafted.
Yeah.
Um, you
Jalen
have
Green.
Jabari Walker's there.
Yeah.
Jalen Green, he might not, be
Yeah.
the guy that everyone thought he would be, but you got like three guys there that have really good potential, but you need veterans around those guys
Yeah.
now. Um, that's I could see the Bulls doing in a couple of years. Like, I'm not saying, like I said, I don't want a Piston situation where in 5 years, 6 years, you're still doing this. Let's keep getting young guys and this constant spiral of losing. I feel like if you position yourself well, you in these next few drafts, you can really add those two type of like prospects that maybe are blue chip guys, in addition to the guys like Coby, Pat. We'll see what Dalen. I mean, he's been playing better, and not to say he's like a high level role player by any means, but he could be a really decent, guy to have long term. And then you add those two young guys, and then you'll maybe go into one of these off seasons where you have the cap space to go add your Fred Van Vliet, if you will, type of
Right.
player, or Dylan Brooks
Dylan
type of
Brooks.
player that can really add winning. At that point, then you can say, okay, we got something going, and those guys can bring some stability into the locker room. That's where my mindset is, and that's why I think even taking advantage of a guy like AC, where you have the value to cash in on, at this point makes a lot of sense because of that.
Yeah. The controversial question, do you think a coaching change may need to happen in order for this team to really get to the next level, whether that be in the form of a rebuild or even what they're trying to do now and continuing to win?
I mean, maybe like, see, I'm not like, I think Billy is like an average coach.
Yeah.
I don't think he's not as bad as like his worst detractors think he is. Like
Right.
I've seen some people like Bulls fans out there say like he's worse than Jim Boylen. It's like, are
No.
you out of your mind?
It's such
Like,
garbage. Yeah.
there's this popular Bulls account that said that. I was like, are you out of your mind? Like, what are
Yeah.
you talking about? Get out of here. Like, no, he's not worse than Jim Boylen.
Yeah.
Like he's not he's not like like a Quinn Snyder, for example, like who's like I would say he like if you had a Quinn Snyder, I think that's like a to me that's like a top 10ish coach. I think Billy's around maybe like 15, 18 in
Yeah.
the league,
Yeah.
like
I would say that.
average,
Yeah.
below average in the league. As far as like changes, I think maybe like it would be more of a sign that the Bulls, if they Billy they did move on from Billy, it'd be more of a sign that they are ready to do a rebuild, because I don't think Billy wants to be part of that type of team where he's trying to just coach, for a couple of seasons, where a young team that he's trying to, work with. That's why he left OKC. Ironically, they're in a
Yeah.
better position. If he maybe had just stuck it with them, he
Right.
would have been coaching a really good team already. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that in that sense, I think a sign would be pointing if you get rid of Billy. So, okay, we're ready to kind of hit the reset button.
Yeah, and I think about that a lot as well. And it I mentioned this before on Twitter, and a few people, disagreed. I do think that part of the reason why the Bulls have been hesitant to trigger a rebuild is because they know that that's not what Billy Donovan wants. And they're very supportive of Billy,
Right.
right? Like they've said that from
Right.
the get-go, and they gave him that secret contract extension, which, it's gonna, like, they would if they were to let him go, they owe him a lot of money. And so I think they know that, and they don't, because of that, they don't want to trigger rebuild. I mean, granted, if things got really bad, and they were kind of on that direction, right, in those first 19 games, then, something like that could happen. But I think that's what, sort of gives them pause as far as, do we want to actually go into a full-blown rebuild, because we know that our coach doesn't want that. At the same time, now they're starting to look better, so they're going to cling on to this idea of continuity again. I don't know, man. I don't know what this team. I don't know what to expect come the trade deadline, because initially I was like, oh, Zach LaVine definitely. Like, I actually thought he had already been traded. I thought there was a deal that had been worked out, but they had to
Yeah.
wait until December 15th, when a lot of other players became trade eligible. I know that more players become trade eligible January 15th. And that's why, he was sitting. I mean, the injury, I'm not saying like it was a fake injury, but it's like, well,
Right.
you're kind of injured. Let's just kind of hold out on this. But now it's like, there's no market for Zach, at least, what's been reported. And now he's back and he's playing. And I'm just like, I don't know what this team is going to do. I like you were saying before, when I was asking you this, I would not be shocked if they stand pat at the deadline. What do you think fans' reaction would be if that ends up being the case?
A lot of anger. I know I'll be angry. I'm gonna be very openly mocking the front office if they do
Yeah,
once again to that decide to, stand pat and try to push forward with this continuity nonsense, because they're a playing team and they can once again get into the play-in tournament and try to see if they can get into the playoffs in that route. I mean, I've like so I've been in a for me it's not even like recent where I wanted a shakeup. I've wanted a shakeup since at the minimum I wanted the big three broken up since not this past summer, since like the the last off season. I was like, they need to do a strong shakeup of that core because it's not really working.
the
What we're
season where
seeing
they
out there.
that was the season they went to the playoffs, but they got beaten pretty badly, right? Where everything kind of
Yeah,
fell
I think
apart after Lonzo Ball didn't. Yeah,
yeah,
okay. I just want to make
and
sure.
I was like, I wanted them to really make a strong move, and maybe find someone that fits with Zach and or DeMar better, like a center that fits
Sure.
with Zach and DeMar better. Unfortunately, they didn't do that. Like I said, they just did the minimal moves, and then as the season went along, it looked more obvious that they needed a strong shake-up move, but they just kept pushing along with continuity. So
Right.
yeah, it's like you said, and like I said, it's not, it wouldn't be a shocker, and it would be just very disappointing, and at the same time not surprising.
Yeah.
Like it's just where we're at as a fan base too. We're just very, we're waiting for this team to really do something, pick a direction really, because right now you're kind of teetering, to being like that kind of, not picking a real direction, not really. You're kind of just riding the middle of the road, and you're not really going anywhere with it.
Yeah, I think it was very surprising when they didn't make any moves at the trade deadline last year. And so because of that,
Right.
now we're just not going to be surprised if that's what ends up being the case. I was shocked at that, because I think the last trade deadline, it was like 28 teams made some sort of move, even if it was incredibly minor. And the Bulls were one of the teams that didn't make a move. And you look at the standings and it's like, this is one of the teams that needs to actually make concrete moves. And they didn't. So yeah, in a way, I almost wouldn't be surprised. I'll get you out of here on this. A little bit of a different question. Who's the player that you're the most excited to see, assuming they're still with the Bulls, in the next 2 to 3 seasons? What player are you the most excited to watch about in terms of their overall progression?
Bias speaking, because I'm a big Pat guy. I see a little bit more offensive potential in him, just because you kind of seeing the off the bounce stuff he does,
Yeah.
like with his pull up jumper, being able to, with a couple of 1-2 dribbles. I think we're kind of seeing even a development of. I know a lot of times this early in the season when he would drive with his left, he would dribble off his foot. But I think we've seen a little bit more development on that as he's gotten more reps on the
Yeah.
court where he's been able to make strong drives. I think for him, it doesn't necessarily more come down to his handles, but more so learning how to with his feet. like work on better footwork
Yeah.
and use his strength to get to his spots. That's what you see a lot of guys like when you talk about guys like DeMar or Jimmy Butler, for example, like those guys don't do anything fancy with the basketball. You watch DeMar when he's handling the ball, the way he moves his feet, the way he uses his hips,
Hmm.
it's that's what like Pat needs to learn.
Yeah.
And the same way with Jimmy, like Jimmy, like kind of, the big thing at Jimmy always says he's always goes right, and everyone knows he's gonna go right, but he still
Right.
gets to his spots because he's strong and he wills his way to his spot.
Yeah.
So like those are the things that I would love to Pat to kind of continue to work on. And I think, like I said, offensively, I think there's probably a little bit more pop there for him to be able to become maybe like a third option type of player, a
Hmm.
solid third option type of player. Um, we can all complain about he was the fourth pick in the draft, and at this point, by maybe he'll never live up to that. But I still am looking forward to seeing him being that really good two-way player that maybe that isn't as bad of a pick, in the next 2, 3 years we look back and say, okay, well, I granted we didn't take Hallie, but still, he was still really good. Turned out to be not a bad pick.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about the fourth pick argument is, and I get it, right? It's a very high pick, but there's been a lot
Right,
of busted four picks. People that were
right,
drafted
right.
fourth or lower sometimes, right? It's like it happens. That's kind of my biggest thing when I talk about, the draft is eh, in a way it is a bit of a crapshoot in terms of what are you actually going to get because any prospect they've never seen time in the NBA and you don't know how they're going to pan out. Granted, the higher it's going to be, the more likely you're going to get, a star level player, but not always. And in with that draft especially, that was a weak draft class. Yeah, they could have
Right.
drafted Halliburton, who I think fell like what 12th. Um, Anthony Edwards, obviously great player. And it's like LaMelo Ball. And then outside of that, especially a lot of the guys that went right after Patrick, they're not
Hmm.
anything that special. So I don't know. I don't like the argument of, oh, this was a busted pick. I can't believe we, wasted a number 4 draft pick on that. It's like really wasn't that talented of a draft class. And I'm like you, I'm still a very big Pat believer. Obviously, there's a lot of work that he needs to do to really improve his overall game. But I feel like we've been seeing that now, especially now that he's been given more opportunity. And that's what gives me, confidence about the future of, okay, if he can just continue getting more reps, if they can continue focusing on his development, we can see Pat becoming a solid starter. The whole Kawhi 2.0 comparisons, we're not
Oh,
going to
no,
get
yeah,
there.
that was always absurd. Like it was unfair. Like,
Yeah,
like all the love to Stacy, no disrespect to him, but like calling him the paw
the
was
paw,
just like
yeah.
setting him up for failure. It's like it's just unfair to compare him to like Kawhi, who is going to end up being a generational type of player, a guy that took two teams, was like not two teams, but like it took at least one team to a championship, and obviously that
Right.
Spurs team was loaded, but he was the Finals MVP on there. But yeah, it's an unfair comparison when you consider that. So yeah, I like Pat. I think, like I said, I think there's still more to him, and I kind of see it as like Coby last season. We saw him play well. He didn't. The numbers overall didn't look
Sure,
great,
they weren't like
but we
popping out.
saw
Yeah.
he got
Yeah.
better. And now you come into this season and you see it. Like there it is. This is Kobe breaking out. I think something similar for Pat could be in store next season. Like he's kind of figured it out in a sense this season. And then next season where you see, boom, now he's gonna, have his little breakout, if you will.
The big question is, do they resign him? Which I think they will, but do you think they'll resign
Yeah,
him?
I,
Yeah.
I think I'm worried about the Pistons, to be honest, because they're gonna have a
Just
lot of
like
cap
throwing big
space.
money at him.
Yeah. A lot of people get mad when you're talking about Pat's contract, and like I would be comfortable doing like 4 years, 100, Then that's just me. I get it. It's 20, 25 mil
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
roughly a year. I would feel comfortable doing like 25 million a year because it's a percentage of the cap space. He's 22 years old.
Yeah.
I really believe he's going to be one of those really good two-way guys, and that's what those guys are getting paid. I mean, you saw like a Jeremy Grant got
Yeah.
like 4 years,
Yeah.
160 or
Jeremy.
something like that. Yeah.
Do you mean
You
Jeremy
got
Grant or
other
Jaden
guys.
McDaniels? Well,
Jeremy
Jeremy Grant
Grant
got a big contract, but
for
I usually liken him to like Jaden McDaniels. I mean, I think
yeah, that
McDaniels is
too,
a better.
Jaden McDaniels, and who's a comparable player to be
Yeah,
honest. Like, yeah, and he was in the same draft class as Pat.
right.
And they're very comparable players. I think Jaden's a much better defender. He's just a really, really good, like, probably underrated around the league. He's probably should be like a first team, second team all defense
Yeah,
type of caliber player. Um, but they're similar players overall as
yeah.
archetypes, and the similar age. And I think what did he get, like a 38 million a
It
year or
was,
something
yeah,
like
it
that?
was, yeah. So I mean, if you
Yeah,
compare it to
averaging
like
out.
that, it's not, it's
Yeah,
reasonable,
so I
right?
think,
Yeah,
yeah, I think it is. I think it's a reasonable number for Pat, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm just worried about, like I said, the Pistons coming in and giving him a wild like number because they have the cap space and they want to add. They need like that three big wing four
yeah,
on their roster still that can really space the floor for Cade. So that's my one worry. And the other thing I'll say about Pat too, I'd like to see him up the volume on his shooting.
yeah. Same.
Right now he takes about three a game. I think like the sweet spots for him should be 5, 6 a game. Ideally that happens as his usage goes up more
Mhm.
too. But yeah, those are general thoughts around Pat. I know it's kind of get all over the place with it, but
No,
yeah,
no. The other thing I was going to say is, as it relates to, you said Pistons or any other team throwing big money at him, if it goes to where it's unreachable as it relates to the Bulls luxury tax, that's where I get concerned, right? Because then they might
yeah,
not match if it means that it's going to put them over
right,
the tax
right,
line. Because we know
and
that this ownership is not going to pay the luxury tax, at least as they're
right,
currently constructed, which kind of goes back to moving on from Zach LaVine, why
right.
that is going to be a big, negotiation point as it relates to any trade talks, bringing in expiring money so that way they can get that payroll off the books. But anyway, Salim, man, I really appreciate you making the time on a Tuesday night to come on the channel, talk Bulls basketball with me. Keep up the great work on the Bulls Gold podcast. Hopefully, we'll get to meet up again next time I'm in Chicago. Maybe catch a game too.
No, for sure. I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate our friendship that we've developed over the last year or so. I really appreciate you, and obviously appreciate your work. And thank you again for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. That's what's great about, the Bulls content world, right? Is we're all just kind of like gotten to know each other over the years and become friends because we get to like enjoy talking about this team. So yeah, I love it for sure.
No, yeah, 100%, 100%.
All right, man. You take care, all right?
Thank you, you too.